What is anxiety and what does anxiety feel like? It's an interesting question because even though I've suffered with it for many years, when you're within the issue, it's quite difficult sometimes to look inside yourself and to understand what it is. So I'm going to think deeply now for a minute and try to explain what anxiety is. It's a sensation which I have felt particularly sharply in the morning time. So when I wake, and thankfully, thank God, and this is September 2021, the issue is improving for me at the moment. But my anxiety is most sharpest at the morning, first thing when I wake up, and it manifests itself in the form of, very difficult to describe, but it's a feeling of dread and a feeling of guilt and a feeling of worry and impending that there's something bad is going to go wrong. All very illogical, and hours later in the afternoon, for instance, if I was looking back to look back at it, and sometimes I write all these things down, 99% of them are illogical. They might have 1% of a seed of factual relevance to my life. You know, it might be something to do with if I don't get buy something, then something else won't happen, but the illogicality of it at the time would be if I don't buy something, it's the end of the world. So that would be the problem. That seed blossoms and blooms and chokes everything else. It's a feeling that I've felt for many years. First moment in the morning when I open my eyes. And that moment is a feeling of dread. And it's the worst moment of the day for me. That first second is the worst. The first minute then. The first 10 minutes. And it improves as time goes by. But sometimes, in my worst times, it can take hours to come out of that feeling of chronic anxiety in the morning. And what is it? Try to think of what anxiety feels like for people who haven't, if you're lucky enough never to have experienced it. If you've ever been walking in a field and there's an electric fence and sometimes you put your hand on it and you get that buzz, in some ways that feeling of anxiety, certainly generalized anxiety disorder, which is probably closest to what I have, that's what it feels like. That sort of a low level buzzing of electricity in your nervous system. And the nervous system is an electrical system. It's got pulses of electricity running through it all the time, which activate our muscles and everything in our limbs and all that sort of stuff. So it's an overactivity of it. It's a physical feeling of that low level buzzing in the nervous system. But also then it's coupled with the mind, and of course the mind is the big issue there. And what's happening there is overthinking, for me, is the big thing. And all the way through my life, through my education, which I really enjoyed, and education and has been vital to me, and I'm very grateful for the education that I've got, and all of the advice and all of the guidance that I've got through education is think more leads to an improvement in your life. So think things out. I was trained as an engineer, so you're trained to think and analyze and work out problems and to get to a solution. So I adopted that doctrine in my own life. And what I have found, and it's taken me many years to realize this, is that the more I think things and analyze problems, the worse I feel, and the less empowered I am at the end of it. And that possibly the key to life is just to glide through those problems and let them happen, and let them knock you in the face sometimes, and they'll just bounce off. Because I look at people who don't think of things at all, they don't worry about things at all, and they seem to have a lot easier time than me. So that is my problem, and that is anxiety. So anxiety is overthinking for me. It's that physical feeling, and it's also the overthinking. So that has always been the worst time of the day, was the morning time. And really, if you could plot a graph of my condition, it would be 0 out of 10 and first thing that I wake. Really horrible feeling at the morning time, and then it would gradually maybe go to 1 out of 10 and maybe stay at that for a while, and then maybe 1 or 2 out of 10. And when I would get downstairs and have my first cup of coffee, that's the point where I jolt up to maybe 4 out of 10. So coffee has been that bridge. That first cup of coffee that I have in the morning is that bridge between that awful anxiety where I wake up and I feel so vulnerable, and a lot of that illogical thoughts take over, and my ability to rationalize things just isn't there. And I've gone through this with various groups and counselors haven't been terribly useful, but in a lot of groups, just normal layman people have been a lot better than the qualified counselors. And one thing somebody threw up was that when you wake up, you are that child that was suffering when you were younger, and you are waking up as that child. And that really kind of, my jaw dropped when I heard it, because it made a lot of sense, even though it's obviously not physically literally true, but it makes a lot of sense in terms of handling trauma, and you're unconscious through the night handling that trauma and then being jolted into the conscious. And my attitude about all these things is that, but anything like that, is that if it works, then it's a useful belief and an empowering one. If it leads to improvement, and in some ways it probably is giving me an insight. And I filmed myself sleeping. A byproduct of watching that film, that little video, was that I felt a lot of compassion for myself for possibly the first time. Let me know in the comments if you try it, and I hope it helps you. See you next time.